Alright, so I'm gonna respond to a couple of comments / questions. So the first one is from Bella. It says, "Hi David, how do I know that we share the same consciousness? I can see that you appear within my consciousness, and the same must apply for you, meaning that I appear in your consciousness. Therefore, we must share the same consciousness, which means I'm talking to myself. Why don't I get it? Why don't I experience it?" So this is something that I've mentioned quite a lot, I talked about quite a lot, because this was a kind of insight that appeared, or you could say it was kind of like the insight that at the moment of awakening, that it was like the experiential insight that clarified this, or that experience that you're describing is what appeared when this, talking in relative terms in time, when this clarified beyond the doubt, when this really clarified. So I could suggest that the reason why you don't feel like you're experiencing that is because what you're looking for is a confirmation, an objective confirmation of what you think, or what the mind thinks that is, which is a projection and a concept. And this function is kind of fundamental to the whole structure of self, and it appears in many different apparent forms, but at the core of that function is a subjective position. So say, for example, if you hear me talking about that, and then there will be an idea, or which is a thought, which is conceptual in a way. It might not appear that way, it might be subtle, that's not what this is now. It's something in the future that is a specific experience, a well-defined experience that can be objectively recognized as that, and confirmed in an objective way. When we look to confirm something or conclude something in experience, what we do is we automatically assume this subjective position. Whereas what I'm talking about with the universe talking to itself is pointing to the absence of that subjective position. That subjective position limits experience, so to speak, to something objective, something that can be known or recognized as a thing, as an object, as distinct from everything else. What seems to do that is the subjective position, the one noticing, the one referring and relating to experience, to define it as something, to categorize it or recognize it as something specific, a specific experience somehow apart from other experiences. That's what I think is happening here, based on what you're saying, is that you're looking for an objective confirmation of the idea of what that is, which is why it's so hard to talk about this, because pointing when it's effective points past that subjective position, points to what's already here, that doesn't need to be defined by a subjective view, doesn't need to be defined by as a specific thing, as an object, as something apart from the one viewing it. The specific obstruction here is the idea of my experience and your experience, and these are kind of words that I use to point past those limitations. But everything we say is framed automatically in self and other, subject and object. So it can easily be taken as downloaded by the mind and understood in those terms, and those terms are its limitation. That's all it can do. What you're describing as an experience there that you feel like you're not experiencing isn't something that clarifies as a conclusion or an objective recognition. Isn't something that clarifies as a specific experience distinct from the rest of this. It's not a satisfying conclusion in that way. It's the conclusion is something that is recognised with an end point, as in like that's that. Okay, that's that. Now I know that. This is ongoingness. It's not something that can be concluded and defined in that objective way, if that makes any sense. So what I'm doing when I talk in that way, based on my own experience, is to point past the limitations of me and you, my experience and your experience, because we're always talking about experience. My experience and your experience is added to it, definitive and defined apart from everything else. Experience with its own values is added to this in thought, in concept and interpretation. That interpretation is done from this subjective position. So a good way to approach this is to relax the conceptual categorizations of my experience, your experience, and just have it be experience, and bring it back here to where you're looking from. Bring it back to the subject that is holding the view in this. That subject that's holding the view in this will see someone like me talk about this, and this just happens automatically. It will be interpreted as this here David is an enlightened separate person or something like that, and that's not the case. What I'm always pointing to is whoever's watching your experience. Like you're saying, I appear in your experience, I am your experience, talking in your experience, appearing maybe as what might seem like a separate person, but that's it. You can't get into the experience of David because it's not accessible. It doesn't even exist. It's not even real. There's just experience, and it is you could say your experience, but experience as it's appearing there wherever you are now. Getting closer and closer to that, and not further away from that by interpreting the experience of another, is how this clarifies. And we get closer to that by coming back, bringing our attention back, or dilating attention out back in towards the subjective view, the position of the you that's in this. the one that's watching or hearing or thinking. And then we just notice what the thoughts are saying about it, what interpretations there are that are solidifying conceptual frameworks around this. One of them being that this that I'm experiencing now, is this experience, my experience, is somehow apart from the experience of others. This that I'm experiencing now is, there's something else to this. There's something else. There are parts out with this experience of mine. Whereas in the direct experience, that's not true. There's just experience. There's just this, which you hear all the time in these non-dual circles. So it's very, very much directed back towards the subject, back towards the sense of view that it feels like it's not experiencing something else, something that's not this. When that function relaxes, then what I'm talking about can clarify. So what all these phrases and words point to, but not as an interpretation, as a direct clarity, as something that's not doubtable, because it doesn't have limits. It's like transcendent of the limitations of doubt. Doubt can't touch it. It's too obvious. And in that way, I can't talk about it. I can only give language that seems to point to that, filtered through the limitations of me and you, subject and object. But what I try to do on here is continuously point past that. So what you were kind of quoting there is one of the ways in which I point past the separateness of me and the separateness of you. So if we go to the direct experience, then what makes it look like there's a me and the you? What makes it look like there's a my experience here and a your experience there? Or me talking from here, you hearing over there. A dichotomy, a conversation between two seeming entities with their own independent consciousness, that the self comes before. What makes it look like that? And it gets really, really subtle, and it might seem elusive, but what makes it look like that? None of that exists in the direct experience. None of that exists in the senses, in the direct sense. None of that exists at all. It's absent. It's completely absent. It's added to this by thought. It's a limited interpretation of what this is: experience. Just experience. So then even the label experience can drop away, because that's based on an experiencer, one in it or one apart from it, experiencing it, relating to it, referring to it, viewing it, listening to it, the listener, the viewer, the thinker. Those are all the experiencer, the central one. And that doesn't exist in the direct experience. That doesn't exist in the senses. It's simply not there. And when it's not there, then I could maybe interpret that somehow in language by saying things like experience is talking to itself, hearing itself, seeing itself. But you see how I can't get much clearer than things like this without lots of elaborate language, because which is the limitation of this whole channel, because that's about as close as I can get to it. Something like that, or other things that I might say, and it's framed in duality, it's framed in subject-object. There's something hearing itself. There's something talking to itself. 1, 2. It's more direct, it's more simple, it's more immediate than that. So if we do like a little exercise, and you might want to like close the eyes or something like that, and just as I'm talking, as you're listening, to the words. Notice that in the direct experience, in the sound, in the words immediate, how many people are going to watch this video? Probably hundreds. I'm only talking to you. You're hearing it, let's say, but I'm talking directly to you and only to you. What would frame it in a way that you're watching a video, and that video was recorded back in time, and it's posted on a public platform, so it's viewed by lots of people. It's this kind of innate or inert recorded file of sound that represents apparently a man talking. But in the direct experience of it, it's completely alive, and it becomes alive through the hearing of it, through your hearing of it. You're giving this life, and it's your life force, your consciousness makes this very moment alive. And in the sound of it, in the hearing of it, there isn't a David on the screen talking to you and you hearing it. There's just the sound. The sound is entirely transcendent directly of any of those boundaries, borders, or limitations, or dualities. And the sound is wide awake, it's completely alive, it's completely spontaneous. It doesn't exist in time. It's appearing now, it's sounding now, which is completely transcendent of time altogether. Completely transcendent of location or limitation or size or shape or dimension. We try and find the shape and the size of the sounds. Try and find the location of the sound and the one hearing it. If you reach a conclusion on that, notice what's it making it look like that. That there's a sound over there and a me hearing it here. In the actual sound. Where is it? Where is that? Where is the sound? Because over there and me hearing it here, as the hearer, as the observer, are added to the sound. They're interpretations. The sound is much more free, immediate and direct than that. It can't be captured by those limitations. It doesn't have substance in that way. It doesn't have objectivity. It's given objectivity by the subject who appears to be listening to it, but the sound is primary to that. The sound is more real than that, by far. Can you find the sound without a thought? Can you find where it is? That the actual sound, not where you think it's coming from or where you think it's hearing it, but in the actual sound. Can you find it? Where is it? What are its qualities, its shapes, its sizes, its dimensions, its location? It doesn't have any. It's completely zero-dimensional, dimensionless, too free to be bound and limited by dimensions. So you could maybe say that this sound appears within your consciousness. Is there your consciousness or your awareness? And then the sound, in the immediate and direct experience of it. Is there your awareness and the sound? Where does the awareness meet the sound? Where does the awareness touch the sound or is separate from the sound? Where is the boundary between what you are and the sound? Or is it completely and mysteriously seamless. This isn't something that can be concluded or defined with a thought or an interpretation or a concept. It's prior to all that. It's transcendent completely of all that. All that is laid on top of it as a framework that comes very quickly after in thought, in a habitual way, and it's all based on me, the hearer, the subject. So that might seem vague and kind of elusive, but that's kind of what I'm pointing to when I say things like that. I'm always pointing to direct experience, and I do that by talking about my direct experience, which is kind of like an indirect way of doing it, because there is no direct way that I know of, especially not through a medium like this. But it can become direct when this resonates. This kind of leads nicely into the next question. So let me know if that's helpful. The key is in thought. There's a function in thought that's making it look like, that's making this look complicated and like it needs to be objectively noticed from a subjective position as a confirmation or conclusion. Like, I confirm the thing that David said, but it doesn't happen like that, which is quite unsatisfying for the mind. Can get the mind revved up a bit, but it clarifies in the absence of that function, when the mind calms down, when it's not trying so hard to get something, which is why I always see this as a backwards process. This is also why it sounds like I'm talking in riddles a lot of the time, and it can be frustrating. So, demo gadget, specific part of this question, I think. Right, okay, I'll read the whole thing. These short pointers are great, thanks. Now I can see the benefits of walking, meditation, just to absorb and not labeling and just be with the senses. Yeah. I'm struggling with distance, by the way. Yeah, so distance. It's kind of like the same thing that I talked about in just there with the distance. It's an interpretation. The interpretation is based on this subjective position, looking out at an objective world. The objective world being something separate from me, the looker, that's out there at a distance. You'll hear people say that there is no distance in experience. Distance is a thought-based interpretation. Distance is an illusion, or I would call it augmented onto sense experience by the mind. The augmentation being like seemingly seamless with the sense experience, like integrated into it. You can never understand and predict what that is if it doesn't feel clear to you, right? You'll never be able to understand and predict from that subjective position, using that subject-object thought function, what I'm talking about. Which is kind of the cool part about, this is my favourite part of the awakening thing, the cool part about it, because it becomes like when this realization has a magnificence of, and the mystery of the sense experience, like the visual sense specifically, it's just mind-blowingly paradoxical that, like, because it's kind of like there's this weird threshold that I experience where it's not like you notice this from the subjective view, from a viewpoint of me here, the subject, the one looking, and you confirm the experience as a I have noticed that from here. It's not like that. But the mind, even after this begins clarifying, at least for me, the mind kept trying to do that, kept trying to interpret it, and it started off quite scary because it was faced with the unknown. It didn't quite know. It was just confusing and scary and a bit frightening at times. And it was it's kind of like it dawns at that point. For me, it dawned that this is real. This awakening thing isn't like a lofty concept. This is like so direct, so immediate. I realised how real it was, and it's like when you notice that about the fabric of reality, the very fabric of, in an existential sense, experience itself, you start to leave the realm of concept into the real, or what you could call real. Which again is another interpretation, but it's much more real, much more direct than the kind of dissociative floating cloud of the ground of being, that the kind of blanket, the all-pervasive blanket of infinite awareness that certainly is me. You start to leave that, and it can get, so part of us doesn't want to see that, doesn't want to see it because it's too real, it's too intense from that point of view. That point of view just can't understand it, so it reacts with a survival instinct. A kind of tangenting here. What are we talking about? Yeah, it doesn't confirm from that subjective position. It might seem like it for a time, but as it clarifies, that relaxes. The subjective position can only see distance. It can only recognize objects at a distance, reinforcing the object called me that's here looking at it. People would call that the subject. But the subject assumes itself to be an object because it looks out at objects, and that's all it knows. It looks at other people as objects, and other people stop here. So your senses stop here in the hearing, stop here in the seeing, stop here in the physical touch. None of those talking about what you actually are, which isn't particularly anything, but it can clarify. None of those boundaries exist in experience as a real thing at the ultimate level, which is what I'm always pointing to. But there's an assumption here that what I am is what I see, which is a bunch of objects, and that's an interpretation from the mind. So I can tell you how this clarified for me, so to speak, is that what I noticed went along with this assumption of distance was the assumption that the space between me and objects existed as an object. It's not there. It's invisible. It can't be perceived. It's imperceptible, if that's a word. It simply isn't there. But there was an assumption that there is this space. In the seeing, there is this space. By the way, you can apply the same thing to the hearing. By the way, apparently the hearing sound, because it's less defined by the mind, it can be easier to realise this in the sound. But for me, this clarified in the visual experience first. When that happened, it was clear in all other senses quite quickly. But yeah, the space, can you perceive the space between objects? In the direct visual sense, can you perceive the space between objects? So I look out the building over there, and there's what appears to be an appearance that I call a building over there. Between where I'm looking and that building, is there anything there? In the seeing and the seen? What's making it look like there is a space there? this might seem absurd, right? The mind might put up a bit of a fight with this because it doesn't make sense. It makes no sense at all, because the only sense that we've got to go off is I'm looking from here across empty space at a building over there. But that's not the experience directly. There's nothing between me and that, the scene. There's nothing there, right? You can kind of get glimpses of this that way, right? But when this really clarified, this might not be the case for everyone, but for me this clarified when I looked back from the object, right? Which you can't do because there isn't distance. but I looked back from the object in a linear fashion. So I say I was looking at this phone in a linear fashion from there, straight back, straight back, straight back. I think I stop here somewhere, straight back and through the visual sense. And there was this assumption that I'd never even looked at before, that I stop here, I'm looking out some sort of window that is distinct, like a barrier, a clear barrier into the external world. And as soon as I looked at that, I realised that's not even there. That's not there. So why, in the visual sense, direct? This is when I really got in touch with direct experience. There was this weird assumption that because I see other people, they stop here, I assume I stop here, and the eye looks out from the eye or the brain or whatever, and it's an object here looking out at an objective world out there. I started to notice that in the sense this is completely hollow, and I got a sense of myself, true nature, and what that is, deeply and directly, a sense of true nature that I finally, I'm making this sound final, but like an event, but I finally got in touch with the mystery of what I am beyond the person and the visual sense, that this is completely infinite, hollow. There's no space. This doesn't stop here. The object's out there. This is where you hear people say being in two places at once, occupying the subjective and the objective pole. That this is infinite. That you can experience the infinite nature of this directly. That there is no start, there is no stop. There's no space between, there's no me here looking out, space between an object over there. All there is the appearance. The appearance being what I once knew to be the objective world. It includes my body, apparently, and other people, my image of myself, apparently, in the mirror. Just the scene. That's all there is. And it doesn't have dimensions, it doesn't have distance. It appears where it is, which the mind would say is over there, but when the mind stops saying it's over there in a real way, it stops augmenting that assumed reality onto it. To me, it appeared to be here, like where I am, flat almost. You get this kind of side effect of it flattens out like a screen, and that's what kind of freaked me out a bit. That it flattens out like a screen, and it's like in your face, and it's like I started seeing things behind my head. That sounds ridiculous, but I looked in the mirror at myself in the bathroom, and I saw my head behind my head, like 7 feet behind my head. I was like, what? Because that augmentation of distance that seemed solid before wasn't there anymore. That was just a side effect experience, but it gets deeper than that, to the point where the mind stops trying to interpret it with all these weird experiential side effects, and it is zero dimensional but also includes all dimensions, complete paradox, and you allow it to be what it is, just the scene, just the appearance. No me in here looking. If anything, like I said before, it's looking at itself, or the what the visual sense is, which isn't separate from any other sense, by the way, appears as what it is, entirely aware of itself, entirely made of awareness. The light is awareness. The scene is aware, it's awareness, it's pure awareness, presently as the scene, appearing as what it is and nothing else, without any need for any sort of interpretation of what that is and what it means. And that's the freedom. So look back to where you're looking from. Where do you start? Where does your looking start, and where does what scene start and stop? If you know yourself to be pure awareness, pure consciousness, or pure presence, is there a suggestion that there is a background here where I'm looking from? Like a nothing back here where I occupy, that is somehow distinct and separate from manifestation that I am aware of? Define that division and experience. I love talking about this one because it's the coolest, in my opinion, the coolest realization. With this, a lot of the seeking thing goes out the window, because the mystery, the paradox, and the fascination, and the magnificence of the sense experience, you can get lost in it because it's so enjoyable, because you're not looking for something in it as something in it anymore. It becomes what it is, and you notice that what it is a miracle, and it never diminishes. No more boredom ever. No more boredom ever. I wouldn't conclude that for myself, because that would be projecting an idea into the future, but no more boredom. Here, there's no boredom. It's an ongoing miracle, non-stop, infinitely, without a start and an end. It's insane. It's absolutely mad that this was, so to speak, how it is anyway, and that it was overlooked. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. The miracle is this. It's not another experience of something different in the future. You're experiencing it. Whoever's watching this right now, it's just like what your experience is right now. That's it. So that's why this doesn't matter, you know. It just doesn't matter. So where are you awareness separate from what you're aware of? You can do this with all the senses, but the visual sense is kind of like, I guess, the most overt sense that there is if you were to categorize them. But when you get a taste for this, right, especially in the visual sense, when you get a taste for what I'm talking about here, the hollow emptiness of this position of the object, the object of me, when you start to see through that, then you can start to taste that in all experience, all the other senses, all the divisions between senses, and now you can know, so to speak, or it's clarifying what non-dual is, what that is, which isn't anything or is everything, but like, some of you will know what I'm talking about. When you taste that and you know what that is, then it's just into that. Like, you just look for what's not that in experience, and when you see what's not that in experience, it stops being real. It doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't mean it's not important, or it doesn't have a value, or is to be resisted or disregarded. It's just not real anymore. It's not the primary solid reality that we thought it to be. So then you can start looking for limitations. Like, where is the limitation in this seeing? Like, any direction, where is the limitation? Because it was like, before, it was like, you know, you see like car headlights, they kind of point out a bit from a bird's eye view. It was kind of, to me, like I was shooting my attention out like car headlights, like lamps coming out my eyes through this imaginary window that wasn't there, and my awareness was hitting and bouncing off and coming back from all the objects that I was seeing, being distinct and separate from me, all that goes as well, because none of that's happening. None of that's happening. It's like the world falls in through your eyes and just keeps falling, or you fall out through your eyes and keep falling, or both at the same time, as a kind of experiential side effect. And that there aren't limits to this. I think whoever commented here mentioned Frank Yang. He talks about and in his videos he does the 360 camera, and he talks about the 360 degree awareness or something like that, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. We're talking about the same thing. It's like you're no longer here looking out. It's no longer unidirectional, back and forth attention, from here out, back, from here out, notice, relate, perceive, back. That relaxes. So then the assumption that this is pointing out goes away, and what it's replaced with is it doesn't have. It's not like behind me is a thing. There's no me here anymore. It's just the scene, which doesn't have limitations. It's so hard to describe. And in an artistic way, Frank Yang's doing that with his 360 camera to try and, I guess, point to or symbolise the visual sense without an agent in it, a looker, a perceiver, a separate one. It doesn't have forward, back, up, down, left, right. It doesn't have limit. It doesn't stop anywhere. It keeps going in all directions infinitely with no dimensions at the same time. That sounds obscure, right? And so obscure you can't even look for that in experience, because that makes no sense, which is kind of the idea here. You just look into your experience and you might phrase it differently. But again, what I did and what you'll do for sure probably is look for an idea of what this is going to be like, and that's a massive and subtle distraction, because it's like how it is now. You get more in touch with presence, what it's like now, because I could see you're looking at it, but it's here and it's clear already. When the noticer is forgotten about, it notices itself, and it's clear that ongoing, all it's doing is being aware and noticing itself, and it is you, as the senses, as presence. So whenever there's a dissatisfaction or a comparison or an interpretation of something, maybe I might say, or another non-dual speaker will say, that we have an idea about what it's going to mean and what it's going to be like, and it's sneaky, it will come about in a subtle way, and it will say it's not this, it's something else, or this is going to change. It doesn't change, which is the weird thing, right? This is so weird, but like, it, in a way, it does change, but it doesn't, like with everything in this, but it doesn't change in the way that you think it's going to change. You might have some weird side effects, but the augmentation, what makes it look like a three-dimensional external world that I'm looking at from a discrete point of view in here, in a way, that goes away completely, in a way, right? But that doesn't mean that thought function can't still operate. That doesn't mean that I can't recognize objects and, relate to my external world in a conventional way. The augmentation is merely a thought function. It's not reality. You'd maybe say it as a reality from the point of view of self. That can, in a way, that goes away in its reality. It's not real. It's seen for what it is, which is a thought function, a transient thought. What you, so to speak, see past that is what the senses really are, in the absence of the interpretation from the subjective point of view, which is indescribable, because all descriptions are based upon a subjective point of view relating to an objective experience. That's why I can't tell you what it is, because if I could just say, here, look at this. Oh, cool, done. Clear, non-dual enlightenment, done. But where's the fun in that? Now, where's the drama in that? Like, because it's like I said at the beginning, it was a long video. Can you tell I like talking about this specific insight or realization? Like I said at the beginning of the video, that when this clarifies, there's this. I can never quite explain this, right? I've tried to explain it so many times, but you have to experience it. There's this weird mismatch between what the mind thought it was looking for and what actually clarifies, and it's just like a big joke. It's like, you really, and with that comes a huge relief, and it's just laughable that what I thought that I am could understand this, or I was going to get something, or there even is enlightenment in the personal sense. It's just a big joke. It's just like a massive. You just let go of all that, or you have no choice but to let go of all that, looking for something else, looking for something that's not this, and then this just is what it is, which is perfection. Perfection might sound like an interpretation in comparison to something that's not perfect, but it is the only way it could be, because it is. That's it. So all that looking for something else, me on the path, never happened. It was just a thought. It was only one thought that was appearing. It's only one thought that was appearing, not even distinct from any other thoughts. Like not even distinct from anything else. Like it was just one thought, and that one thought had the power to create this whole illusion of me, the seeker, on a spiritual path, looking for something different. It's not. That's not already the case. Like, it's a fucking joke. It's a fucking joke. It's like the ultimate wind up. It's always the one thought that feels real. The one thought that feels like me, because I give it that sense of identity, gives it reality, and it's like I need to get something. I need to find something better than this. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing that relaxes away and stops. But it has this momentum that it feels like it needs to be there, and every time that subjective assumption and thought appears, it also has the power to suggest an entire lifetime, an entire future that doesn't exist, with me at this point in time in the centre of it, moving through it, relating to an external. One thought has that power. This strange function has the power to create all that, and none of that exists in experience other than that thought. It just comes and goes. It's wild. It's like, that's why forming a positive or curious relationship with thought and not fighting that thought. The only thing that can fight that thought function is that thought function itself. It's such a powerful, incredible illusion. You can't win against that. Like, the me can't win against, the me can't resist thought. It's made of thought itself. Thought resisting thought, it just doesn't work. That's why curiosity, clarity, and that works much better when we're relaxed. We approach this in a relaxed. I think reverence and gratitude kind of come to mind there for every aspect of this experience, including the apparent self. Like, I made a post on Reddit and I described my experience post-awakening, so to speak, and there was I think I said something similar, like reverence, appreciation and gratitude for what that is. Not just trying to dismiss and get rid of something, but there was like, and that led to like a kind of mourning for that, or like a sadness around that in a very profound and beautiful way that never existed. It didn't exist. And it's, so in that, it's like it loses its reality, it loses its existence, it loses its life in a sense, the real life that it seemed to have. And it's, it's not, I could say something like, that's not something for the faint-hearted, but it kind of misinterprets it. It's nothing trivial. It's like the most existential, most profound investigation that you can do. And like I said, like at the point, sorry I forgot your name, whoever commented here, that you're at, going into the senses and investigating what this really is. At some point, maybe at the point you're at now, the only way I can describe it is it gets real. There's it's like the fun and games are over, and from the point of view of that separate self, and we are confronted directly with this that we've been avoiding, the sense experience, the senses, this mystery, like what the fuck, this big what the fuck, what is this? And maybe not everyone will get this. I'd be surprised if, I could be wrong, if there might be some very well balanced individuals like emotionally out there, but I'd be surprised if anyone went through this and didn't feel that sort of profound heaviness at some point, or that mourning, or that overwhelming realness of the senses that hits you hard. I'd be surprised, but I could be wrong. But what we're avoiding is the intensity and the mystery, and the magnitude, and the incomprehensibility of this here, the sense experience as it is. We're letting go of that need to understand and need to know that we based our whole existence on. Our whole existence is based on this. This is knowing, the knowing. And this is where we let go of that knowing into the unknown. And so it can be intense for sure. Anyway, that's quite a long video. That'll do for now, and very good questions, and I'll talk to you next time.